Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief Headlines Edition, all the daily AI news you need in around 5 minutes. We kick off today with something a little bit different than our normal content. In a recent Joe Rogan interview, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders argued that the time saved by using AI tools should be given back to the workers. Specifically, he's calling for an AI-powered 4-day workweek. Bernie said, "Technology is going to work to improve us, not just the people who own the technology and the CEOs of large corporations. You are a worker. Your productivity is increasing because we give you AI, right? Instead of throwing you out on the street, I'm going to reduce your work week to 32 hours. Now, before we get more in-depth on this, let's talk about why we're even talking about it. There is going to be a temptation with AI to try to frame things in very binary terms. Either it is the relentless march forward, where people in society are just completely subject to immutable forces that they can't control, or on the other side of the spectrum, it's going to be calls for bannings, claims of apocalypse, and all of that sort of thing. I think it's incredibly important that a leader of Bernie Sanders' stature, who is, you would imagine, not natively going to be super a priori pro-technologist, is having a rational conversation around how society might want to distribute the gains of this technology. In other words, the point isn't whether or not you agree with him. The point is that it's a good conversation to have, and he's providing an opening to have it. So what about this idea specifically of a 4-day work week? Sanders contended that, by the way, this is not a radical idea. There are companies around the world that are doing it with some success. Some examples of that might be Microsoft Japan piloted a 4-day work week in 2019 and reported a 40% boost in productivity. In a larger trial, 61 UK companies tested the 4-day work week for 6 months and found an average 1.4% boost to revenue. Several European countries have adopted the 4-day work week in various forms over recent years, with Iceland now having around 90% of the population working a 4-day work week. Productivity remained the same or improved in most workplaces, and measures of worker well-being improved dramatically. Closing his pitch, Sanders said, "Let's use technology to benefit workers. That means give you more time with your family, with your friends, for education, whatever the hell you want to do." Now, there are infinite counterarguments to this. Mandated restrictions on work kind of just tend to mean that the people who are willing to work more will get ahead. Then there's all the issues of whether people will just fill this time with second jobs. But that doesn't mean the discussion is not worth happening. If you listen to the most bullish AI optimists, they think that we are careening towards a world of hyperabundance. If that's correct, we're going to have to decide what the new social contract looks like around that hyperabundance. If they're right, it's going to be a heck of a lot more transformative than just a 4-day work week. But that's not an unreasonable spot to start the conversation. Next, an update on Mark Zuckerberg's aggressive recruitment tactics. It appears as though he has been successful in poaching 3 OpenAI researchers for his new superintelligence division. The Wall Street Journal reports that Meta's recruiting drive has yielded 3 new members for Zuck's AI Dream Team. The 3 researchers that appear to be heading over are all from OpenAI's Zurich office, which was set up late last year. To those lamenting the tactics, there is a bit of turnaround as fair play here, as OpenAI had themselves poached the trio from Google DeepMind. The Journal also wrote that this has definitely forced OpenAI to play ball in a different way. They wrote, "Some AI researchers have turned down the Meta CEO, and in several cases, OpenAI has counteroffered, giving its researchers more money and scope to stay." Now, last week, you might remember that Sam Altman had boasted that none of their top people had taken up Zuck on his $100 million offers. And in a Tuesday New York Times podcast appearance, he shrugged it off, saying that he wasn't worried, adding, "It's like, okay, Zuckerberg is doing some new insane thing. What's next?" And yet ultimately, if you're really seeing $100 million offers, there's no way at some point that some people don't take that. Now, while some commented that this looks all a little bit mercenary, I'm pretty firmly in the camp of all is fair in love and war. And frankly, I'm just waiting for these labs to realize that if the top engineers are worth $100 million, the top go-to-market and strategy voice has got to be at least a tenth of that, right? Speaking of Meta and following up on a story from yesterday, they have also won a judgment in a copyright lawsuit. Hot on the heels of the Anthropic ruling on Tuesday, a federal judge has ruled that Meta didn't breach copyright by using books and training data. This is one of the lawsuits brought by Sarah Silverman alongside 12 other authors. In a summary judgment, the judge wrote that he had, quote, "no choice but to grant summary judgment to Meta," adding that the plaintiffs had made the wrong arguments and offered insufficient evidence. He added, "The key question in virtually any case where a defendant has copied someone's original work without permission is whether allowing people to engage in that sort of conduct would substantially diminish the market for the original. Where the copying of the work diminishes the ability of the author to sell the original work," and the judge in this case said that the plaintiffs had, quote, "presented no meaningful evidence on market dilution at all." Importantly, and in much the same way as the Anthropic judgment, while this is a major win for Meta, The judge went to pains to limit the decision to the specific circumstance, writing, "This ruling does not stand for the proposition that Meta's use of copyrighted materials to train its language models is lawful. In cases involving uses like Meta's, it seems like the plaintiffs will often win, at least where those cases have better developed records on the market effects of the defendant's use." In other words, while copyright holders are now 0 for 2 this week, there is still a lot of fighting left before this issue is resolved. As I keep saying, it is completely inevitable that one or more of these cases end up in the Supreme Court, and even the federal judges don't seem to have a lot of sympathy for the arguments being made by AI companies, even if they're ruling in their favor. In the Meta ruling, for example, the judge commented on the argument that copyright should be set aside to prevent the technology from being stopped in its tracks. He wrote, "These products are expected to generate billions, even trillions of dollars for the companies that are developing them. If using copyrighted works to train the models is as necessary as the companies say, they'll figure out a way to compensate copyright holders for it." Anyways, friends, that is going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief Headlines edition. Next up, the main episode.